Well, a big thank you to Remel London from Capital Extra for that intro. Hello and welcome to Tuning In, Breaking Out of the Bubble, the last of our Tuning In conferences for 2020. Well, 2020 is a year we will all remember, that's for sure. No prizes for guessing what's going to feature in all those year-end roundups, which will be coming up very soon. One thing we have all acquired is a brand new vocabulary: social distancing, lockdowns, circuit breakers, and of course, bubbles. So we did have a bit of a think about the bubble title of our conference, if I'm honest. We certainly didn't want to fall foul of the COVID police. So, just to be very clear, our bubble today is not to do with the pandemic, nor about how many bubbles can be formed before, during, or after Christmas. It is rather about our natural human tendency to exist primarily in our own bubbles, to associate with like-minded people, and therefore to see the world mainly through that one prism. Now, we are, of course, tribal beings, and that's a perfectly natural way to behave. It's why we attach ourselves to different groups throughout our lives, from school groups to football teams, to music genres or TV and radio shows, for example. But if we fail sometimes to consider that others outside our bubble might think and act completely differently from us, we could be heading for problems, especially, I would say, in business, especially in politics, and most especially in the media. Now, social media has only exacerbated this behavior and subsequent way of thinking. So today we're publishing 2 studies which shed some surprising light on the theme and hopefully will help all of us challenge our own thinking and break out of our own bubbles. These complementary reports examine 2 sides of the coin, if you like. First, a study of those making those all-important ad spending decisions. And second, a look at the consumers who are on the receiving end of those decisions. Our goal is to get some new insight into what makes those 2 very different audiences tick. So we reprieved the 2018 Ubiquity study, Re-evaluating Media, looking at perception versus reality when it comes to the efficacy of spending decisions measured against empirical data. And now, of course, there's an added element thrown in of the uncertain times we live in. We wanted to know, does the perception versus reality equation continue to work in this instance? So Radiocentre's Mark Barber and Martin Vintner of Ubiquity will unveil these findings. This study, we believe, furnishes planners with another layer of robust data, helping them to challenge themselves and to reach better and more informed decisions. What we discovered was, as the recovery begins, radio, just behind television, it is the most effective media for connecting brands with new customers and supporting that all-important growth. So that's a fact worth considering. And now to the other side of the equation, the consumers, or listeners, as we like to call them in a radio world. What motivates them to stay listening? We already know that radio has been incredibly quick to adapt and innovate. It's 100 years old, but has constantly reinvented itself to keep up with its audience and ahead of its audience at times. So recently, an explosion of digital channels and the new advent of smart speakers has kept it relevant to the 90% of the UK population who still tune in every week. And early adapters are a big part of the radio audience. During these recent times of lockdown, radio really did come into its own. People wanted company, information, trusted news. Mostly they wanted to feel part of something bigger during a time where they were isolating at home. Recent reports have showed that listeners have upped their time with radio by nearly a third since pre-pandemic. But a finding that really jumped out at us from this report, challenged our own thinking, if you like, is a surprisingly large group of radio listeners, those we've termed the outsiders. Of the 36 million people who listen to commercial radio every week, there are 12 million who would never actively seek out news, who do not listen to the news, but they do listen to the news bulletins delivered on the hour. They trust what they hear on the radio. They don't try and avoid it, but they don't seek any further once they've heard it. They've probably got other things to do, to be honest with you. This behaviour is probably not what most of us who work in the media would recognise, as we're constantly checking phones for updates and consuming news from a wide variety of sources. It is, however, a salutary reminder that really big audiences still consume news and other content in quite a traditional way. And that's why our report is called Beyond the Bubble, and to explain its findings, I'm handing over to Radiocentre's Matt Payton.